People are fed up to the back teeth with a government that never takes responsibility and just tries to blame everyone. They can shout if they're proud of the fact that over 98% of rapists are never put before. If they want to shout about that, that's their record. Let them shout about it. You should be ashamed of yourselves. The truth is simple. After 13 years of Tory government, crime is out of control and people are paying the price. Before Christmas, the BBC reported the shocking case of a woman in Armthorpe who'd been beaten with a baseball bat by burglars 3 years ago. Nobody had been charged with that burglary and she couldn't sleep at night. Under their watch, tragically, that's not an unusual case. So can the Prime Minister tell us what's the charge rate for theft and burglary across the country?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, actually, since 2019, neighbourhood crime is down by 25%. But he asked rightly about what's happening with rape cases. So let me just tell him that we are on track to meet our target of doubling the number of rape cases that are reaching our courts. Since the Rape Review Action Plan was published, we've seen police referrals double. We've seen charges double. And last year, there was a 65% increase in rape convictions.
Yes.
But importantly, we also changed the law to ensure that rapists would spend more time in prison. But what did his shadow policing minister say? Prison doesn't prevent crime. It tells you everything that you need to know about the Labour Party. You can't trust them to keep Britain safe.
Ava, that was Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak clashing in the House of Commons today. You spoke about this as well, actually, didn't you, on 5 Live? How was that with Naga Munchetty?
Yeah, it was very good. But, I mean, it totally blindsided me because I did not think that was what Keir was going to open with today. I mean, it's on the same day that we found out inflation had gone up by 0.3%. So it means that, you know, people around the country are still paying an extortionate amount for their food and veg, their rent, their mortgages, all of that. I was really surprised that he opened on this.
Yeah, we'll get to that point as well because I definitely want to talk about that. The thing that was revealing, interesting to me about that clip was the kind of braying from the Tory benches at the beginning when Starmer was talking about I can't think of the adjectives to describe how bad the rape conviction rate is in this country. It is 1.6%, isn't it?
Appalling, yeah.
And it's quite revealing about Westminster, I think, or kind of the paucity of our national debate, that whilst he's talking about that, he's kind of getting booed, jeered from the benches opposite him.
And also, I don't know what stat he pulled, but if you look at Q1, so moving from 22 to 23, rape prosecutions have actually gone down by 6%.
Because
that was the CPS own figure.
Rishi Sunak said that they'd increased by 65%, I think, in that clip, didn't they?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, which is really bizarre. So I think talking about crime is really interesting because you can cherry pick your statistics and you can kind of massage figures a little bit. Like that neighbourhood crime being down 25%, that comment he made, well, there's a difference between, like, you know, causation and correlation. I mean, over the last couple of years, people have been working from home. They're a lot more present in their houses. So, yeah, burglaries have gone down because burglary has actually moved online. There's a lot more, considerable more online fraud than we used to have. And yet, crime is now not breaking into someone's homes and stealing their television.
I wonder what you think as well more broadly about the political consequences for the Labour Party pursuing the Tories on crime. I know, obviously, the classic Blair line, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Do you think it could pay off for Labour to kind of try and steal the Tories' thunder? You know, traditionally, you would associate that sort of law and order, slightly more authoritarian politics with the right. What's Labour up to there?
Do you think maybe it's part of the culture war? Because you could argue it's, you know, the Tories are going after your children aren't safe in school, they're being taught about sexual education. Labour are going after you're not safe on your streets, it's dangerous out there and we're going to protect you, the Tories won't.
Yeah, I guess it plays into that. I know it's a bit of a stereotype, but like fund the NHS, hang the pedos, like election thing where it's like, when we talk about Britain as whether it's conservative or liberal, and I think those two terms are actually kind of useless to describe it at this point, but if you were, you'd kind of say, well, actually, I think Britain economically is kind of to the left in the kind of the national adoration. I think the closest thing we obviously have to a religion is like the NHS, right? But actually, it's pretty conservative when it comes to social issues like crime.
Yeah, no, definitely it is. Yeah, I've been. It's just quite an obvious thing to bring out on the doorstep, isn't it? That, you know, you're not safe and we'll protect you. It's just so obvious. But, you know, one of the proposals that Keir put forward today during PMQs, I thought was really interesting. And it pulls on a line that Dame Casey, who was the woman who wrote the report that came out yesterday on the Met, which is that if you are a woman who has been murdered in London, you will have the best team on you. Like, they will find that murderer, they will trace it, it's excellent. But if you're a woman who is assaulted or, you know, sexually or just physically, the team that you're given are basically just kind of local police who are sort of like starting on like 29k. They're not very well trained, they're not very good. And what Keir is calling for is specialist force, you know, resources inside them, so that if you're murdered, you'll get the same treatment as if you're assaulted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I actually think that policy is pretty good if they enact it.
I think as well, the thing I'd be slightly concerned about if I was a Labour advisor, if you feed that beast, if you feed authoritarian sentiment, I think eventually you run the risk of it getting away from you and eventually consuming you, and if it's not you, then it'll be whoever the next Labour leader is.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the job of a leader to kind of cater to people's most base instincts. I think it's the job of a leader to set out a vision and then move people towards you. I don't think it's your job to listen to focus groups and think, oh yeah, well, people are actually pretty anti-nonces, so we're going to introduce the death penalty for them. It's your job, whatever your view is, I don't know if you're the Labour leader on crime, if you think being more compassionate, regardless of whether people think differently to you, it's your job to make the case for it and convince people that the way you see it is the way it should be, not to just follow what people already think.
Yeah, but I mean, he is the former director of public prosecutions, isn't he? And he's kind of leaning into that role.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't heard him talk about that before, actually.
Yeah.
And his dad was a toolmaker, I think.
But do you not think it's interesting that he's trying to own that now?
Yeah.
Before it was a line that was used by Boris Johnson to chastise him over the Jimmy Savile case. It was like a jibe, and now Keir's trying to own it and be like, well, you know, I actually was really tough on crime when I was director, and I'll do that again as Prime Minister.
There is an implication, isn't there, if because there was a line in PMQs where Starmer said, not personally, but I prosecuted X number of rapists or whatever when I was DPP. And that's interesting, because if you are assuming personal responsibility for that, then obviously it follows, are you then going to assume personal responsibility for not prosecuting Savile? That's kind of the follow of the logic, right?
Yeah, and the same logic can be applied to Rishi Sunak. So when he's saying, under the Conservative government, neighbourhood crime is down, you know, we've had all these successes in policing, but then when Dame Louise Casey says that the Met is institutionally racist, you say, well, that's not our problem, that's the Mayor of London's problem. So it's like you either absorb all of the responsibility or none of it.
Shock.
Yeah.
Alison McGovern, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for accepting the point of order. Just now, the Prime Minister, in response to a question about his pretence that living standards are getting better in this country, replied that he is halving inflation on the very day that we have found out that inflation is in fact rising. So could I ask you, Mr. Speaker, as you said on this important day for this House, could I ask you how the Prime Minister can correct the record?
As the Honourable knows, and I know, she does know the answer to that. What I would say is she's actually put it on the record what the situation is.
I mean, it's really egregious, isn't it, that he was allowed to say that?
Yeah, I mean,
in Parliament.
For sure. And before we get into it, you're right. It's like, oh yeah, we're halving inflation. It's gone up today. Come on, man.
Yeah, and when your former Prime Minister, your predecessor, is going on trial at a select committee hearing over lying later that day, or misleading the House, the House, you're going to stand up and mislead the House. It's farcical.
Yeah, I almost as farcical. Every time the MPs do this, they make this whenever someone says point of order, you know it's not going to be a point of order. It has nothing to do with the processes of the Commons. That was it Kate Osborne who asked the question to Sunak about inflation? Yeah. Yeah,
Labour's Kate Osborne, who is the MP of Jarrow, the Jarrow.
Yeah.
She raised it, and she said that her constituents were facing, they were having trouble paying for their food. And it's true, everyone, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you've noticed that your food shop is considerably more expensive than it used to be. And the knock-on effect of that has actually been on our hospitality sector, which I talked about last time. I will not rest. It is the third biggest sector in this country, and it is not taken seriously at all on a government level. Like, the amount of people who are employed by that are totally just like, nothing to the government. But, food prices means that restaurants are more expensive to run. They're also suffering from energy prices. And now you're actually seeing a lot of restaurants are closing.
When Sunak announced that, was it his pledge or mission? I can't remember which of them said which was. Keir's missions and Rishi's were, I can't remember whether they were, whatever. It was, the first one is, we will halve inflation.
Yeah.
And if you look at what the Bank of England was forecasting at the time he made that promise, it was forecasting that inflation would halve before the end of this year. And so I thought, okay, well, that's quite clever because they think that's what's going to happen anyway. You don't have to particularly have to do much to achieve it. It is interesting that it's not going down. And I wonder whether he's going to get into a bit of sticky. It would be ironic if he got into trouble over this, pledging to basically do something that he thought was a near-on certainty. And actually turns out it doesn't happen, and he doesn't have the power to make it happen.
But you don't need to be an economist to explain why it hasn't gone down. Really, we should have seen it coming because your energy bills haven't gone down. The price of food has not gone down. Actually, we just had a month where we couldn't get tomatoes into supermarkets. So there's no clear indicator of why it should have decreased.
Another clip.